Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Santons, longtime basic income advocate, president of the Income Support All Foundation, and editor of Basic Income Today. And I'm joined again with my co-hosts Conrad Shaw and Josh Worth from Comingle.
Hello.
And so we're trying to add a little bit more format to this with this episode today. And so I just want to go over a little bit of the kind of the shape of what we're looking to do. We'd like to see kind of more of a regular thing, and even schedule these as a weekly thing, even beyond the Comingle crowdfunder. So we just really like how it's like a podcast with I know like a live studio audience kind of situation, and it's great to be able to interact with everyone and kind of build up this community. And so each of these episodes too will be posted later to YouTube, like we've been doing with the first two so far. And so these will be like probably 2 hour episodes each time. The first hour will be more about us talking about latest like basic income news and various topics around basic income and Comingle. And we encourage everyone to reply to on Twitter with text questions to the main space, so we can get some input from you during the actual conversation, and can help like direct and inspire our discussion. And then during the second hour, will probably be more about bringing people on and having much more of an open kind of Q&A format for that second hour. And as part of this too, if you'd like to help out, as far as like editing and audio and video stuff, like helping get this on YouTube and everything, that would be great. If anyone wants to help with that, reach out to us. And this time we will start. Each time this month, we'll start with just a little bit of a Comingle update. So we'll just, I guess we'll do that now, and then we'll go on from there. I'll just mention a couple news items, and then we'll move on to our special guest, which I'm happy to say is Sabrina Aviles. Did I pronounce that right, Sabrina?
Aviles.
Thank you. And yeah, she's the filmmaker. She's directed this great documentary called Raising the Floor, and really looking forward to telling you all about this. Some of you have heard about it, some of you haven't, so I don't want to say too much yet, but I'm really excited about being able to get into the nuts and bolts of an actual like basic income, what kind of turned out to be a basic income pilot, but really was never even intended to kind of be along those lines. So yeah, first, Conrad, do you want to give us an update on where the Indiegogo campaign is right now with Comingle?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to add one thing to what you said for the people who are new to Spaces. If you want to leave comments during the and tweets and questions, the little button on the bottom right that looks like a comment button, if you've navigated away from the thread, will get you back there. Okay, so what happened? So the other day we announced that we had a $10,000 matching donor who was going to match every $1,000 we got in up to $10,000. So the thing that happened about 5 minutes before this space is we hit our first $1,000 and he matched it. So we are at now $36,581 from 333 backers. That's almost 49% of our goal, and yeah, that's a really good thing to push right now. If people are waiting to see how the crowdfund does and stuff like that, I would say don't. right now we're trying to make this matching donor put as much of his money in as possible, as quickly as possible.
Did you want to just mention like a quick like minute thing or something just to let people know what Comingle
Oh
is
yeah,
too?
what's Comingle? Yeah, some of you haven't been here before for that. So basically, the idea behind Comingle is sort of a do-it-yourself UBI. The I've been in space for a very long time. I've been working on a film like Sabrina, and you get to the point where obviously the North Star of UBI is a federally legislated basic income, but how much faith do we have that that's going to happen very soon? And realizing when Josh, who's here today from Comingle, reached out to me with this idea that the power of technology is such that we can do a lot just ourselves. We can transfer money really easily between each other. We can organize it very efficiently. We can build essentially our own scalable permanent UBI. And so that's what Comingle is. It's essentially a flat income tax based UBI model. So everyone who becomes a member will pledge 7% of their income each week toward the pot, and everyone will collect an equal share of the full pot once it's collected. So essentially, it becomes a redistributive mechanism from the people above the average income in the pot to below the average income of the pot every single week, and it's based on how much money you may or may not have made that week. So for a quick example, if say you're a gig worker and you get paid once a month or you get paid sporadically, but you get a good check on the first week of this month. So say your 7% of your income means you're chipping in $150, and the payout is $50. That means you contributed $100 that week, and that 98, 97 cents of every dollar is going straight to somebody else who needs it more that week. And then in the following weeks, if you don't have a gig, if you don't have an income, or if you're between paychecks, you contribute 7% of zero income, and you get the $50 back. So you come out $50 ahead on all the weeks that you don't have income. It's essentially a way for people to smooth out their income curves if their income is sporadic, help others who have low income if they have high income and they like to give and want to know they're giving very efficiently, and guarantee that everybody on the platform has a floor of income, at least something coming in every single week.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Conrad. So long story short, it's a Comingle community is about making sure that no member goes without a small basic income floor, for that week. So next, I just want to go to just some news items that caught my eye, and in the future episodes, we'll spend like a little bit more time on these and less time that we've done so far, since we won't be like talking about the whole shape of everything again. But I just want to mention some things that have gone on my radar that I think were interesting that can promote discussion too in the second hour as far as the Q&A goes. And so one of them I thought was interesting was that apparently HUD is exploring the effectiveness of cash instead of housing vouchers. And I think that's really interesting as far as being able to show just how effective cash can be in making sure that people can actually afford housing anywhere, or make it more affordable anywhere, versus vouchers, where a lot of people don't know that these vouchers aren't accepted by like every landlord. You can't just use it as cash. A lot of people can get them and they just can't even use them. So the fact that HUD is considering like a cash model, I think is a really good development. Next up, I just want to mention that Niels Meyer has passed away, and he was one of the original founders of BN back in 1986, the Basic Income Earth Network. He died recently at 93, and he was based out of Denmark. And he wrote a very popular book there in Denmark back in 1978. It was translated into English as Revolt from the Center. And yeah, he was a strong supporter of basic income. And I wanted to make sure to mention this bit of news too, just to even show that besides to honor what his life working for this, but also that this is not a new idea. This is something that people have been pushing for decades now, centuries even, but especially in the past, especially since like the 1970s or so. So yeah, I just wanted everyone to know about that. And another bit of news, I was a guest yesterday on Point Radio to talk about AI and basic income. And this was kind of inspired by the Expanse universe, and they had the authors on to talk about that too. And I think the episode turned out really well, so I encourage people to go check that out and listen to that as well. And another piece of news there's an article I read about South Africa, and just in general, I think people should know that there's just a lot of activity in South Africa because of what they've been doing with their social release of distress grant post-COVID, and just the level of unemployment and the fact the elections are coming up 2024. Multiple parties are pushing for kind of multiple versions of basic income, what it should look like. There's just a lot of opportunity there for what could happen in the next year or so. And also one more thing, that there's some more activity coming out of Canada, where something that's been happening in Canada is just city councils expressing their support for basic income, where it's not about starting a pilot, it's not about introducing it in any way, but it's really just about saying, hey, this is something that we think is important and that the federal and provincial governments should actually fund and support. So the most recent is Waterloo has been expressing interest, and they have a motion that they'll be, I believe, voting on, or at least discussing on September 18th, so next week or so. And with that, that's the, let's call that the last week in basic income segment. And yeah, now let's bring on Sabrina. And Sabrina, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining us today. And yeah, please just let's start talking about your documentary and just what inspired you to do it, and everything about it.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I will start at the very beginning. So my colleague and I, who's the co-producer, we had been working on another film in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And Chelsea is a gateway city, majority Latinx population, many of which who are undocumented, and who through as a result of COVID, these were the essential workers. So at one point, Chelsea had the highest rate of COVID infections in the country because they just couldn't stay home. These are the people that clean your offices. These are the people that, work in grocery stores. So we had been documenting a lot of that, and so there was interest by the Shaw Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of Wayfair, and they had heard that we were working on another film on Chelsea, and they approached us. They approached us about making a documentary on the Chelsea Eats program, which, by the way, they were one of the funders, along with United Way and other philanthropic agencies. So they approached us, and it was basically a commissioned piece. But we also knew my team and I knew that we didn't just want to make sort of a promotional piece on universal basic income, that the piece had to, as filmmakers, we're always looking for the heart and soul of a community. And we knew that this was really about a community coming together, figuring out, and coming together and coming up with this idea of, what is akin to what turned out to be a universal basic income program. So they approached us, and of course we said yes to it, and that was the inception of it. And so for us, it was, being in Chelsea, we already knew who a lot of the players were, so access, and me being Latina was also very important, in because a lot of our recipients, and actually if you see the three cases that we feature, they're all Latino. So it was it was easy in that we were already a known entity in the community, and it was easy for me to, socially and culturally, connect with our protagonists. So start there.
Thank you. And yeah, let's just even talk about what happened in Chelsea. I think it's just a really interesting example of something that happened during the pandemic, where
Yeah.
there was as someone who's pro basic income, I saw these lines for people lining up for food banks, and it just seemed mad to do that, where we're in a pandemic and people were actually lining up in person in these big lines, for food, and at the same time, the grocery stores are open in general, and there were, they could either do it in person with people standing in line, or you could do it with, giant lines of cars. And like, I definitely, I'll never forget the photos of like the ginormous lines of cars of people
Hmm.
lined up for food bank food.
Right.
And
Right. Uh,
yeah, please tell us about like how Chelsea responded.
so I think, again, if you put yourself in that mindset, imagine being someone who is an essential worker, whether you're documented or undocumented, and knowing that, from one day to the next, when the entire country shut down, how that impacted businesses. And for those of us who are white collar workers, we all just shifted, and um, we went into the world of Zoom and working from home. And that was difficult enough, but these people did not have that option, So they either were immediately cut from work or they continued working. But a lot of them lost their jobs, and they don't have many being, a lot of them lost their jobs, and many were not eligible. If you're undocumented in this country, you're not eligible for things like, eh, eh, unemployment insurance. You're not eligible. They were not receiving. Remember the checks that we got from the government, the
Hmm.
$600, and then again they didn't receive that. So they were not. There was just no. Basically, it was they just cut off their lifeline. So many of them found themselves like not even able to afford money. So at that point, a lot of the nonprofits, organized. It was not only the city; it was also places like La Colaborativa. There was a lot of churches that were also in the food line. I have this vision of us when we were filming. We were filming at the height of the pandemic, prior to this
Hmm.
raising the floor, and I remember having these signs where every single day there was a different organization, providing food, and the lines were, um, incredible. And believe me, there still continues to be a food equity, um, problem in Chelsea now, but that's a conversation for another day. So the city got in on it because it wasn't just enough for the La Colaborativa and all these churches and organizations to do it. The city got in it. So, but they also knew that they were spending so much money, because they were not, as the city manager Tom Ambrosini said, we were not in were not in the business of giving out food. So they had the Salvation Army come in and help them. But once the Salvation Army was going away, they all sort of rallied together and say, what's a better way, a more effective way of doing it that it's not so taxing on our small staff, because they had to pay, transport costs, they had to pay workers to do this, they had to pack the boxes, just a lot of manual labor and costs that they had not anticipated. So this is when the idea, and there's speculation as to really whose idea it was. Was it the city's government? Was it Roy Avenona?
Yeah, now that it worked
They
out
have
so well.
exactly. But we didn't go there. But we heard just a lot of things, in as we were researching. A lot of people sort of claimed that they were the ones, but we just presented this kind of idea where it was sort of a collective decision that the city manager said,
Hmm.
this sounds like it makes sense, and this sounds like a really good idea. So that's how that came about. But it was pretty, just to see those lines. And also just for me, the story again hails back to the fact that it was not only the city, but it was all these community organizations and leaders coming together and trying to find a solution. And again, it was a little bit haphazard the way it all happened, because they were learning as they were going. But
Hmm.
it ended up being, as the documentary says, it ended up being the largest UBI pilot at that point, by spring. I think we finished it in spring 2022, and at that point it was the largest UBI pilot. I think there are larger ones now going on. I know there are, but at
Yeah.
that point it was like 2,000 families, something like that. So
Do you know the parameters of the pilot of like what who is eligible and
yes, so they basically you just had to prove that you're a Chelsea resident. So you just had to. So they were not. They basically did not discount anybody. You had to prove you're a Chelsea resident, and I think you had to. I can't remember the other parameters. There was another parameter in terms of eligibility, if you had to show a certain level of income or not income as it is. But I'm not going to say anything right now about that because I'm not quite sure, so I don't want to misspeak. But I know that it was open to everybody, and it basically they recruited people in the food lines, and they also, a lot of the residents rely on the communications from City Hall, and they found a lot of them found out about these programs through flyers, very grassroots level flyers, Facebook feeds, about it. But I think it was open to everyone. So you just had to prove you're a Chelsea resident, and I don't know the specifics around if you're eligible, if you're at a certain level in terms of income. Probably so, but I don't remember the specifics. I'm hoping that answers your questions. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Some more numbers too. I believe that it wasn't this. It was $200 for like a
Yeah,
single
it was.
person, $400 for families.
Exactly,
So
exactly. So that the max was at $400. So it was 200 to $400. Absolutely. Yeah, it was
right,
max.
and
And it started, I think it was going to start for 6 months. It ended up going 9 months. And then I believe either early this year or late last year, they initiated it again. I can't remember how long it was for. I want to say 3 or 4 months, but they opened it up again. It was so successful the first time, but they knew that they again, because of how expensive it was, because it was expensive. They, but it's successful at that. They couldn't continue it beyond the 9 months. I believe it finished in August of 2021. And then I think they had another phase. I think it was late last year, 2022, early this year. Um, uh, not quite sure, but I know that there was a second part to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to remind everyone too that that what's so interesting about this is like 1/6 of Chelsea's population got this,
Yeah.
and again, we're talking about $200 per person, $400 per couple, essentially, which I think is really interesting from a Comingle's perspective, because that is actually pretty much what the numbers work out to too for Comingle, as far as the size of the floor being $50 a week for a single, $100 a week for, a couple. So, it's interesting how people can think, oh, that's not going to be much. All this was doing was helping people buy food, but it did have quite an impact. And let's talk about those impacts next. Like, what was it that you documented as far as how helpful this was to people and the communities?
Well, first of all, I do want to preface in that we pre-interviewed over, I don't know, I would say maybe close to 100 people, who were willing to talk about it. But again, because many were
Hmm.
of undocumented status, thought that, having a camera in front of them, they just were not comfortable with that. But the stories we did hear that it was really life changing. Many said that, some people who had income, because there were some people who were eligible and had some income coming in, would use it for extra things. If, like, I think Fanny or Vilma say, we paid with our salary, we paid our mortgage, but then with this extra money, then we could pay our electrical bills, or it also, if they used it for food. And actually, one of the requirements of a lot of the UBI programs, pilots that are going on now, is that there's always a research component attached to it. And in this
Hmm.
case, the documentary talks about that. Jeff Liebman of Harvard Kennedy School, he was the one who conducted the research very quickly, and the stats were that most of the income went towards food. And one of the things that we wanted to, from the get-go, we wanted to make sure that we said was that, because a lot of times you hear opponents of UBI talking about, how, that people are going to misuse these funds. They're just going to
Hmm.
spend it on drinking and drugs and whatever. And in fact, there is evidence, and has been evidence, and continues to be evidence, that they use it wisely because they need it. So one of the points that we wanted to make is that not only did it benefit these families, but it actually benefit the local businesses, and that's such a,
Yeah.
pro business is such a, um, I want to say Republican idea, so we definitely wanted to showcase that, and again, the numbers say that, because many people stayed in their community to, and frequented their communities for these foods. But again, I think most people spent the cards, on food, and which, again, if they were working, if they happened to have a job, they could use their job for their rent or mortgage or whatever it is, or other other expenses, and then they just focused on, using the card for food and toiletries and whatever, because you remember, SNAP benefits just limits you to food. You can't
Yeah.
buy napkins or vitamins or whatever. Where here they had free reign.
I
Yeah.
wonder. This is really important to me too. We ran a pilot for a docuseries that we worked on as well, and the focus is so often on, do they waste the money, and trying to prove that they don't
I
waste the
know.
money. But what we found that surprised me was not only did they not waste the money and spend it on good stuff, but people generally invested the money incredibly well and did creative and productive things beyond what you might expect and much faster, like investing in, building gardens in their backyard, and investing in like using the leverage they had to get better and better jobs or start a business. It's the sort of second order, the second order investments and benefits that you see happen that I think don't get enough focus. I'm wondering if you, even with a relatively small UBI, were able to document any stories of, not only did we get more food, but it allowed, some other sort of personal investment in their life and their future beyond scraping by a little better.
I think in our case, we didn't come across that, because I think that honestly, the people that we interviewed, so many of them were sort of in survivor mode. So I think that it was just to get them through to buy the necessities, or basically enhance if any income. Like in the case of Amelia, one of our characters, she had no income whatsoever, none. She had been working in a small grocery store, and then when she found out that people were getting COVID, she just was not interested in being there, because she didn't want to get infected. So she had no income coming in. So I think for her, and she was renting a room. So that little $200 that she was making helped with the room rental and helped with her food. So unfortunately, it was just I think that is true. I think that's absolutely true. But in our case, our population and the people that were getting it, they didn't have that, I guess. I don't want to say privilege, but maybe it is privilege, to use it in that way. And I think you're right. I have seen other documentaries and know of cases where it's afforded them, to invest in other things, and maybe, pursuing some sort of art or education. In this case, I think they used it specifically to survive.
Yeah, individual stories are great and so powerful, but I think that something that's different about the Chelsea pilot and what you've documented is that this was one of the rare opportunities to see community impact.
Exactly.
And so I like to kind of focus a little bit on that, and how you mentioned how effective this was for a small business, and I really want to get into that a bit and really emphasize that, on how, again, this was height of pandemic, and this was an alternative to people standing in line for food banks. So instead of a situation where you had lots of volunteers helping to get people food in a very time-intensive way, where people would stand in line for hours, this enabled people to walk into a store and just get exactly what they wanted, not what was being given to them, but what they wanted from the store. So you had that agency, you had that individual choice that they could do. And of course, too, this is a store, and the store employs people in the community, and then that money that people get, the store owner, the employees at the store, that money too feeds into the community after it's paid there. Like, the money that buys food becomes wages, and then those wages go out into the community to buy other things.
Right.
And the one of the most powerful things that you did with the documentary that I loved when we watched it in Chicago at the Basic Income Conference this year was the when you got people to think about the like immediate area, or not just the immediate area, but like the surrounding like metro areas, and just how much of the money stayed within that general area and did not go off to like, to some foreign bank accounts or to multinational corporations that have nothing to do with Chelsea. Like, could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, we wanted to, as I said before, we wanted to make sure that that was one of the points we brought out in the film, because we always, what I have seen in terms of films around UBI is that, again, people investing in other things with that extra money, or, the mental health of the recipients, which, yes, that's really good. But there was never any, you know, um, I have yet to seen, maybe it's different now. I had yet to seen anything that talked about the impact on the economic impact on the community itself. So
Mhm.
again, that was one of the things that um, it was important for us to show, and also to show the narrative that many of the smaller business owners in Chelsea were impacted, and they too, many of them were Latino. There was one case, one woman who, we wanted to interview her, but at the last minute, again, she got cold feet and she said no. But in her case, she saw the impact not only because she had like what we call a little bodeguita, a bodega, but right next to the store to the bodega is she had like it's not even a restaurant. It's like a takeout service. It's a small little um, I don't even know how you say it in English, where you have like a group of women cooking. And so, because again, in Chelsea, there's a lot of undocumented men who come here and work. These are the, workers that work on your roofs in your garden, they paint. They're usually just renting a room. And
Mhm.
she said there were cases where some of them had their Chelsea Eats card and would come and like literally pay for their food in this like little, again, it's like a, I want to say it's like a takeout restaurant, but it's not even that, because it just has like maybe two or three chairs in the restaurant where they would go and buy their food, their meals, to take back home to them to their room. And she said that she saw that. The card was used not only in her little restaurant, but also in the bodega. So I think again, it's like Carlos said, it's a multiplier effect. When
Mhm.
you invest in giving this to the recipients, they in turn then invest in the community themselves. And for us, this was really, really important because again, there's a lot of small businesses in Chelsea itself, and many, some didn't survive, but a lot did. And I think a lot of it because they're creative, and also because of the impact of the card as well. I hope that answers your
Mhm.
question.
Yes, that's great and provided even more. Another question that I had was actually, do you remember too, like the statistic that you used in the film as far as how much money stayed within the larger community? It was like 70
I think it
something or
was
80 something
almost
percent.
75%, something like that, 70 something percent,
Right.
over 70%. Yeah. Yeah.
Scott, do you have a statistic about what it usually is? Like, 'cause how much actually goes out to Amazon or Walmart or whatever in a usual economy versus with it cycling with a UBI like this?
No, I don't have those statistics on hand. But also, like, part of what made this so special too was that, again, this was heart of pandemic, and a lot of small businesses, of course, were just getting killed during the pandemic, is closing their doors, losing so many customers, and then of course as a result of that, you had people who they either lost their jobs or they kept their jobs, but they lost income. And that's also why like the stimulus payments were so important too,
Right.
besides the unemployment boost, because you needed to help people whose incomes were hurt and not just those who lost their jobs, because
Mm,
so many people were impacted.
yeah.
And could you mention too, like how like we covered like the small business impacts, kind of the economic kind of uh, impact of this, but then I know too, and this was part of the documentary where you covered just like the community impacts of like this feeling of like we're all in this together.
Yeah, I mean, again, we got a lot of information behind the scenes, and one woman who is now the Chelsea's first state rep, she wasn't in the documentary, but she would comment on how prior to the pandemic, uh, everybody sort of worked in a silo. And all of a sudden, when the pandemic hit, it was like, as she likes, what's the phrase she uses? She says it was all hands on deck at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the politics were pushed aside, and the goal, they were all in sort of survival mode at that point. Um, so, but in a way, again, I think that there is this collective empathy for these, especially with the community leaders and the people that work in City Hall. They truly care. First of all, City Hall itself, the politics there, they're very, very progressive. Tom is very progressive, and so I think that the reason it was so successful is because, one, it's because of that, and two, because there was this genuine. And I know it sounds maybe very, eh, you know, you know, uh, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? It's they generally really cared about their population. There was this
Mm-hmm.
connection because, again, and part of it was because a lot of the community leaders were Latino. They were Latinx people. So when they saw their people suffering, they took it very, very personally. And I wonder if especially the city council, I wonder if the city council, had the city council not been um, uh, as diverse as it was, whether a lot of this would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Chelsea has long had a history of corrupt city government. I mean, it's just marred with a lot of not so good things happening in Chelsea. And I don't know if this had happened during that time and there's a reason, right, by the way, that we have a city manager and not a mayor. And it harkens back to at one point, Chelsea was just really, really corrupt, and the schools were in dire shape, and Boston University had to come over and take over the schools. There's all these complicated histories. So I think in any other, excuse me, period of time, um, I'm not so sure they would have come. But I think that, in this case, representation matters. And so many of the city councils, especially, they saw themselves in the in the they related to the community because they were one part of the community and they were an example of the community. I mean, in many ways, I took it very personally too, because when I was filming in Chelsea, I always talk about the story that I saw my father and my parents in these people who were suffering, because my father had a bodega, and had this happened to him when he had a bodega, he'd be one of these people, still struggling and see where, do I close, do I open? So I think that that's the real impact. I think that that's the reason people set aside their differences and work towards the goal, because they saw themselves in the community. And when you see yourself and you represent, it's very easy then to be empathetic. Very
Mm-hmm.
easy.
I'm wondering, in some other pilots that have been more universal, there have been like these impacts where people look around them and even gain like more trust in their communities by seeing, because there's just so many of these myths that people can hold about how people will misuse them, and not even understanding about the business aspects, small business aspects, the way that it multiplier effect in the economy, like these kinds of things. And so, did you come across anybody as far as like being challenged by what they observed and thinking that, wait a second, like you can trust people with money, and I feel even stronger, about this community that I'm part of now?
Um, Not really. No, I didn't come across that. But we do have a scene in the film that when Tom, the city manager, proposed it to the city councilor, there was a couple of voices of opposition, if you will.
Mhm.
And we clearly say it. And, he says that the city councilor, I forgot his name now, he says, it doesn't look good. It doesn't, I think the words were like, it doesn't, I don't want to feel like we're just giving money away to these
Mhm.
people, which is again is the traditional or the rhetoric that we always hear from the right,
Mhm.
again, because it just comes from this myth about people who are perhaps are not of well, who people who are in poverty are in poverty because they don't work hard because they choose not that they choose it, but it comes along with all this baggage about that it's along the way because they don't work hard, or all these myths around poverty as if you chose to be poor, and unfortunately I think that still lingers, and is their argument for wanting to deny a program like this. But in my case, I didn't come across it, and
Mhm.
I think that even this, when you consider that they did a second pilot program very recently in the last year, I think that the city council at that point, if there were any opposition, it was obviously outnumbered because they did a second pilot program,
Mhm.
So no, I didn't run into that. I didn't run into that.
Yeah, I would be very interested in hearing if anyone had kind of changed their thinking. I've seen that. Um, yeah, I was just thinking about how in when Dolly Parton responded in Tennessee to the Gatlinburg fires by providing $1,000 per month to people for
Mhm.
6 months there, that there was a small like miniature documentary, let's say. It's on YouTube. I think it's like around maybe 8 to 10 minutes long. I don't remember exactly how long it is, but they asked some questions to people who were the various recipients of this, and I just remember specifically how there was a more conservative recipient, and they just got to thinking like, yeah, this is exactly what we needed, like,
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I think that there were people who, as when we were pre-interviewing to find our characters, there were people that just wanted to. They don't weren't interested in going on camera, but they just
mhm,
wanted. They thought that maybe by participating, they could, we could have an impact so that they could extend the program more because it was helping them so much. So many people will come to us and like, yes, I have it, I love it. I just want to let you know that, is there any way that you can maybe talk to the funders and have them
mhm,
extended for a few more months or indefinitely. So there was so much of that, because it was life changing to them. Um, but yeah, so it was very bittersweet because it was sort of out of our hands, but they didn't know. So
yeah. Did you want to add anything, Conrad?
I mean, this all rings a very strong bell with with what we saw
Yeah.
with our participants. And it's kind of like when you see it in practice. We came into this not actually wanting to be advocating for basic income as much as experimenting with it. So, like
hmm
leaving room to kick the tires, let people fail, telling the stories good or bad, and using it as an investigative piece. And it was just amazing uh, how obvious it becomes immediately when people have just a little more power,
yeah,
a little more power to make their own choices. That people know what they need, that people
yeah.
know what they want. It's just, yeah.
I was just going to add to that you alluded in the beginning that to try to convince the federal government now and the state that it is to have this happen, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But I'm always one, and I've seen it. Change always starts at the grassroots level. And it thrills me to see so many pilots going on in this country and that the
Mhm.
movement is getting bigger and bigger. Because as much as people talk about the movement about UBI, there's also this ongoing conversation about the wealth inequity in the country. And as
Right.
long as that is in the forefront, maybe UBI is not in the forefront, but as long as that conversation about wealth inequity is in the forefront, UBI is going to is going to come is going to come forward as a possible solution. Hopefully, that's what I think. But I think the one of the I think the analogies you could make about the film that we created is that change starts at a municipal or community level. And to me, that is an allegory to, if this is going to blow up, it's going to blow up, starting at a municipal level, and then hopefully at some point having the feds somehow kick in down the line.
Well,
Mhm.
I mean,
That I'm too optimistic, but
this is sort of part of our theory of change, is adding another very powerful uh, arrow to the quiver, right? Where there's municipal and there's federal, but what hasn't really been explored much before is private, outside of, there's been cryptocurrency models and things like that, but a
Mhm.
private model with real cash. So when we were getting ready to do an impact campaign with the docuseries, or planning it upcoming, there's always that moment at every screening you go to about a cause or an issue where everyone's all excited or angry or energized in some way, and they ask, what can you do? And it's, tell your local elected officials, write a
Right.
letter to your center, and the energy just deflates out of the room
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
nobody really feels like that's going to do the thing.
Yeah.
And what we're realizing now, like this movement right now with all of these pilots going on, each of these pilots essentially is limited by how much funding it has and how long it's going. And the hope for each one is it's going to somehow sway the right people in the right way to get something more permanent in place. And what excited me so much when Josh reached out to me about Comingle is, here's an opportunity to build something that never ends, that grows. It gives the movement a place to live and grow and put the theory into practice, and essentially being, the biggest and first permanent UBI pilot ever. Um, so that as the evidence racks up and racks up, we're actively impacting people's lives and making a stronger and stronger case as we go along, as opposed to, the pilot ends, you try for enough press, see if it makes a difference, and hopefully after a lot of these, it happens, right? It's sort of taking some of the hope out of it and putting more of a proactive, let's just build
Right.
it approach to it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so this is Josh. Yeah, you were sort of mentioning how we're moving, we're trying to get the attention of this at the civic level, and I think what Conrad's saying is like we're also trying to focus on the individual level too, and I think that's what your film is doing, and that's what Conrad's project is doing, is really trying to change the individual minds to see that it's okay to trust other people with money. It is an okay thing to do, to know that if people have some money in their pockets, they're not going to blow it because they're really just like us. So I think that's the real power, I think, of what
Right.
you're doing.
And not having to wait for any specific elected leader to do something, but just going forward ourselves and experimenting with our strength in numbers. That's our motto. Is something I'm really excited to see just how far it can go.
I was kind of curious just about the process of making the film and what that was like for you, like, connecting back to the individual level, like what was that like for you from a financial perspective? Like it's expensive to make movies. How did you pull that off?
So we were really lucky in that it was a commissioned piece. So
Okay.
by the way, if any of you want to see the film, it is now on Canopy. So the way you get to see it, you can stream it, is if you have a library card or if you're
Oh, nice.
affiliated with an education. Yeah, if you have a library card, you can see it for free. And or if you're affiliated with an educational institution, either any institution like high school, grammar school, university, you can also use your email. So either of the things. So if you don't have a library card, go get a library card. Um,
Good
but I would
advice in general.
exactly good advice in general. Let's just let's not buy more books. Let's go read at the library. So the process. So we were really lucky in that we had a very comfortable budget, if you will, because a little backstory around the film. The film originally was going to be a feature length film. We were going to make a film that was going to be probably anywhere between 70 to 90 minutes in length. And we were actually going to focus, Chelsea was going to be one of our pilot programs. We were also going to focus on the current program now that's happening in Denver, where they're giving money to unhoused. I'm sure you all heard about that. And
Hmm.
then we were also talking to the people over in Richmond, Virginia. But that fell through. And then we decided we would just focus on Chelsea. And again, that's where the idea of just making this more about a community coming together, because normally when you make a documentary, you try to focus on one or two people and follow their character's journey. But we couldn't find that person. So, and we knew that our story was our character was the city, our character was the community. So we decided from the get-go, it'll be stronger if we have this collective um, this collective voice, these collective voices speaking as to how it all came about. Um, so we were lucky in that respect, and also if you haven't seen the film, you'll also notice that we used these amazing. We had a wonderful animator. His name is Diego Coutinho. He's Brazilian, and he and his wife are out in Los Angeles, and they normally work on series for Netflix and HBO, and we came across his work and we loved it, and he was really excited about doing this film. But hiring him was not inexpensive. But you can see the result of the work. It's amazing. And again, we were lucky enough to have the funds to pay him. And the other thing that I want to add is that because we had envisioned this as a feature length documentary, we also wanted to go back into the history of how this wasn't a new thing in this country. So as a result, because we didn't do a feature length and we just stuck to the one short, we created two smaller shorts, both about 8 or 10 minutes in length. One that talked about the freedom budget of MLK, because he was
Mm.
talking about how racial economic justice means racial justice. Um, and so we talked about that, and how there were all these people that were signing on, and where he basically said we need a guaranteed income for every person who lives in poverty. And then the other short we also completed is a short on Nixon. It's called Speedinland. And so Nixon, if you know about the history of UBI in this country and Nixon at one point was considering it, and we actually show a speech where he talks about
Hmm.
giving families a minimum a basic income as well. And of course, his cronies came by, and they I forgot, it was Martin, forgot his last name. One of his advisors came up with a story in the 1700s, Spieneland, which basically it emphasized that whole theory that if you give people money, they're just gonna abuse the money, and they're not gonna work, they're gonna drink it off, they're just going, and so it was like this. It's interesting. I the um, whatever it was not based on facts, but he used that story that was concocted in the 1700s, in the 1700s, 18th century,
Right.
to tell Nixon, you can't do that because you're going to abuse the money. And so Nixon then reneged on his original decision of, running on this idea that he was going to do a guaranteed income, and then he said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. He did. By the way, he did the same thing with early childhood education. People said to him, if you fund these early childhood education, that's a socialist communist thing. So we can't do that. And
These
so
kids are going to blow their education.
exactly. And so that was another thing that he ran on. That he was running on. I believe he was running on that he was like, we're going to provide early childhood education. I don't know the exact lingo. And then he flip-flopped. So both of those little documentaries they give context to Raising the Floor, to introduce the audience to this phenomenon, which is not a new one in our country. It was something that was, and imagine if somebody like Nixon had passed it. Imagine where we would be now. That, and even the whole thing with early childhood education.
Yeah.
Imagine where we would be now.
Before we go on, I want to be mindful of your time. I know we're after the hour. Can you stick around with us and even answer questions, or do you need to go soon?
I can stick around for maybe another 10 minutes. I would need to go soon though. But yeah.
Do you want to take a minute, if people need to go that are listening, do you want to take a minute to mention where the film's going to be screened? I know there's one coming up on the 22nd. I'll talk about that.
Margaret would know better.
Okay. Josh Bocanegra's campaign is going to be doing a free screening.
Yeah.
And we reposted the details for that on the Comingle feed, and I'll try to get him in here if I can.
Yeah, Josh is here, so maybe even Josh could talk about it a bit.
Great.
He can't at the moment, but he is listening in.
Okay.
So I'll be there too, so I can.
Yeah. I have to say, our impact producer knows our schedule better than I do. So
not a problem.
Yeah.
That's going to be on September 22nd on a Friday.
Does anybody have any questions at all for Sabrina while she's still here in the next 10 minutes while we still have her? If you do, then just click the button to ask to speak, and I can set you up for that. And as we wait for someone, if anyone, to ask some questions, I'll just want to comment that I think it's just I think it's funny that when anyone to this day brings up Speen Hamland as some kind of evidence against basic income, because for multiple reasons, but I think it's kind of funny that as you mentioned, this is something like 400 years ago.
Exactly.
And those same people, like if you tell them like, oh, did you see about this pilot in Namibia and India that just happened a few years ago, and it was a full universal basic income, and these are all these amazing impacts, and they're like, that's over there.
Exactly.
Like, really? So people living right now in Namibia and India are less are less like us than people 400 years ago in ancient Europe or whatever.
Yeah. In that little short, we have there's beautiful animation by the same animator we hired for Raising the Floor. It's basically we have a Nixon historian. His name is Rick Perlstein. He's out of Chicago, and he basically tells us the story of about Nixon introducing this, and then goes into Speenhamland, and but he's quite the character, and he basically says that Speenhamland was basically akin to fake news. That's what he used. That's the term that he used. So it's just it never happened. It was a way the governments or the powers that be then sort of to manipulate the media, much like today.
Yeah,
So,
and just like a quick thing too for listeners, just so you know a little bit more about Speen Hamlin, is that it was, you know, essentially bred back in the day, and you know, without a work requirement, let's say, and then of course this was a report was written up about this, and I think if fake news is a good determination of that. But if you look into this stuff, it's not even something you could easily say is one thing, is what I thought was really interesting by looking
right,
into this myself years ago.
you're
It's
right.
like
Yeah, you're right.
one town, you know, could do something like it would have 100% marginal tax rate. So like if you did work, then you lose that, and then another town wouldn't. And so like even trying to treat this as one thing, besides being so old and arguing over this with like using long these old records and determining what was real and
Mm-hmm.
what isn't, like it's crazy how that could even really influence this discussion at all right now, besides just being of historical interest.
Well, yeah, and I think if it, you know, and also I would argue that things like that happen all the time. I mean, even when you think of things and even how we interpret, you know, and I'm not going to go too much into religious politics, but even how certain people, groups of people interpret what is written in the Bible and others interpret, you know, and this book is, you know,
Hmm.
thousands of years old. You know, we can take any text or context and then just manipulate it in a way to serve our purposes, and
Yeah.
that's what happened in this case. Absolutely. I do want to say that those two shorts are not available on Canopy, but if you have, there's a streaming service called Ovid TV, and they do a lot of sort of art house. If for some reason you are subscribed to Ovid TV, all three shorts are available on Ovid TV or Ovid, OVID. It's a streaming service. And it's by subscription only, but if you're interested in seeing them, the two accompanying shorts, which I highly recommend, are there. And we're working on seeing if we can get them on another platform as well, because I really do think, I personally think that all three should be shown together. We have yet to be that lucky to show all three together.
Hmm.
But so,
Hey, Josh, if you're listening, maybe you could do that.
yeah.
And for listeners, again, raisingthefloorfilm.com is the website to even, you know, learn more about this and find information, links, that kind of thing to be able to watch this.
Hey, as we're running out of time, I want to remind everyone that we're going to stick around and do some movement building ourselves and talk about Comingle, answer questions, strategize for the crowdfund. So yeah, don't take off when Sabrina has to go.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Sabrina, for joining us today. I really, really enjoyed this conversation and being able to learn from your expertise of it and your experience of what you did and saw in Chelsea. And thank you so much, too, for just choosing to make the film and tell those stories. I think it's just a really valuable film to be out there to help people understand just what this idea is capable of.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I mean, a lot of the work that I do as a filmmaker is built around social justice, and our goal is not only to have these films be seen, but to again ignite conversations. As I like to say, there are some films that spark conversations, and there are others that spark change. And
Mm.
I'd like to I I would love if a film